I'm going to talk to you about why I think you should consider using HTML5 technology for your next game project. So I'm going to talk briefly about the technology itself and focus more on the tools available for game development and platforms that we can target when we have HTML5 builds. So a little bit about me. Right now I'm running a gaming studio called Prune Games. We obviously do HTML5 games. But I've started my career as a full-stack web developer, and at one point I decided to move into game development industry. So for me, the most obvious choice was to actually use the technology that I was most familiar with to start developing games. And I've been doing that for more than 5 years now, worked in several companies, and developed around 25 games, I didn't count, in that time. And most recently, I was part of the team behind the newest version, who developed the newest version of Phaser gaming framework, which I'm going to mention in later slides. So the first thing that I wanted to address is that I see a lot of people using the term HTML5 without really knowing what it is. And I've even found this quote on an actual specification page by one of the groups who stands behind HTML5 standard. And it says the term HTML5 is widely used as a buzzword to refer to modern web technologies. And I think this is also very true when it comes to talking about HTML5 games. So I wanted to talk a bit more about what those technologies are. So basically, HTML is a markup language. We have CSS and JavaScript. And for us as game developers, JavaScript is the most important tool because it allows us to give interactivity and to define logic of our game. And I see a lot of people are not exactly sure how we are even able to make games with this technology that was intended for presenting content on the web. So basically, in HTML5, the number 5 is the number of the version of HTML markup language. And with that version, we got introduced to new elements such as canvas and audio, which allow us to dynamically generate 2D graphics in web environment, as well as playback and manipulate audio without a need for an external third-party plugins such as Flash. And these elements also provide a programmatic interface that we can use in JavaScript, but the features were kind of limited, and later we got introduced to new JavaScript APIs such as WebGL and WebAudio, which allow us to generate 3D graphics in the web environment, as well as utilize the GPU power for performance. And with WebAudio, we have some some advanced features such as dynamic effects and 3D audio, etc. But nowadays, as game developers, you don't really have to know about all these technologies to be able to make games. It's good to know about this to have a good foundation for your knowledge, but basically there are so many tools that allow you to create games, and I want to focus more about that. So I want to start with tools for non-developers. So there are tools that you don't have to have any prior coding skills to be able to create games and publish HTML5 games. And the best tool that I found is called gdevelop. It's a complete environment with a visual editor. It's a free and open source and enables you to develop 2D games. And they use something they call event-based system to add interactivity to your 2D graphics. There's also a tool called Twine. It's a bit specific. It allows you to create nonlinear interactive stories, and it can be used for some narrative-driven games. And both of these tools are free and open source, and I think they can be very useful for non-technical personnel on the team to actually be able to develop prototypes and proofs of concepts without help of a developer, and in that way make the process faster, as well as I think these tools can be used for educational purposes to introduce students to game development concepts without requiring them to know how to code. And I also put here Games Maker Studio 2 and Construct 3 because they are very popular tools. They are paid tools, and they also support building HTML5 builds. So if you use this, it can be useful for you as well. Next, we have tools where we use HTML5 technologies to develop 2D games. And I already mentioned Phaser. So Phaser is free and open source gaming framework, and it's a full-blown framework with really a lot of functionalities with several types of renderers, a complete audio engine, twinning modules, and really a lot of stuff that you as a game developer need to use to develop games. What it lacks is a visual environment, but luckily there's a tool called Phaser Editor, which is this little cute logo with a dinosaur. And it's a paid tool, but if you prefer to use all the functionality available in Phaser, you can then have also a visual editor for your workflow. Next we have Create.js, which is also free and open source. It's a suite of libraries, and it was initially developed in cooperation with Adobe with the goal to help Flash developers much more easily translate into HTML5 territory. Then we have Impact, which until recently was paid and proprietary. Now the creator has made it open source. It has a visual editor and also has some accompanying tools that I'm going to mention later that help you much more easily target specific platforms. Then we have Egret engine, which is very popular in China. I think that more than 200,000 developers in China actually use this engine. It's developed by a Chinese company. They also develop a lot of accompanying tools to really complete your workflow, and they have a lot of documentation in English as well, so it might be useful too. It's a great choice for an engine. There's also Panda 2, which is not free and open source, it's paid, but it has a visual editor, it has some additional functionalities such as remote development, which makes it easier to develop on mobile devices, as well as some cloud build tools, which I'm going to talk later a bit more. And if you want to start with something small, Melon.js is a really lightweight, free and open source library that you can use. And last, we have Pixie.js, which is very popular. It's not specifically a game development tool, but it's a very fast and performant 2D renderer for the web. So if you want to have more control over your tool set, if you want to have, for instance, custom audio engine, or you want to have, I don't know, use a specific animation library, then Pixie.js can be really a great option for you when it comes to rendering graphics. Next, we have tools for creating 3D games in with HTML5 technologies. A little less options than with 2D, but still some great options. We have Babylon.js, which is very popular. It's free and open source, and it even has a free and open source visual editor. Then we have Play Canvas, which have a free and open source engine, but they have a lot of accompanying cloud-based tools, such as browser-based editor and some collaboration tools that can really help out developing games with multiple people. There's also a tool called LaiaBox, which is a Chinese 3D engine for creating HTML5 games, and I really don't know too much more about it because the entire website, the documentation is in Chinese. But it is one of the tools that you can use to create 3D games. So I put it in here because it could be useful to somebody. And lastly, we have Tree.js, which is kind of the same thing which Pixie.js is a very fast and performant 3D graphics renderer that you can use if you want to have more control over your tool set. Then we have tools that I call hybrid tools. Might not be the best naming, but I call them like that because you can use other technologies to finally have an HTML5 build. So there's Cocoa 2D. It's a very popular tool. It's a free and open source, and it comes with a Cocoa Creator environment, which is also free and open source. Then we have Default, which was developed by King, company behind the games such as Candy Crush Saga and similar. And this is actually the engine they use to develop their own games, but they made it free and open source for the broader community to use. And I forgot, in Cocoa 2D you can use JavaScript, but also C++ and Lua scripting code to develop games, while Default only accepts Lua scripting language, but you can build HTML5 builds. And we have probably the most popular tools such as Unreal and Unity, and they both have WebGL builds, although Unreal claims that it's still experimental and not recommended for production use, while Unity has issues with the build size, and in HTML5 environment, build size is very important. There are tools like Export to Canvas, which is a Unity plugin that can help you have more optimized builds, but it's very pricey, and I don't think it's the best option for small studios with limited budgets, but maybe if you're a big studio, maybe it can be useful for you. Next we have since we're working in a web environment, we have a lot of tools that are available for web developers that they use when making their own web apps that you can use when making your own games. I'm not going to go into much detail here because we're short on time, but basically you can optimize your code, optimize your graphics, audio assets, then you can manage your dependencies, external libraries, etc., and even have some additional features above which you have with just basic JavaScript. But what I want to talk more about are platforms that we can target with HTML5 builds. So, of course, obviously, browsers, both mobile and desktop, I mean, they're like the native environment for HTML5 games. But we can also publish HTML5 games on mobile. So there's a tool called Cordova, which is free and open source, and it basically allows you to wrap an HTML5 build inside of a native mobile app and allows you to publish on Android, iOS, and Windows phones as well. I previously mentioned a cloud-based builds. So basically there are services which are cloud-based, such as PhoneGap and Cocoon, which allow you to, just with a few clicks away and uploading your HTML5 build, you can download a native app and easily publish it. They're usually paid services if you really use them for production, but there are some free options if you want to test it out. But as I said, Cordova is free and open source, and you can also use it by yourself in your project, but it can be kind of hard to configure the right way, and cloud-based build systems are really there to help us out, make our lives easier as developers. We can also publish on desktop platforms using the same techniques. So we can use tools like NWJS and Electron to wrap our HTML5 games inside of a desktop build, and then publish it on Steam, itch.io, or whichever platform you choose to publish for desktop. We can even publish on consoles. So for instance, the tool that I mentioned, Panda 2, has a built-in option to create builds for Xbox One. But a platform that is very interesting to me, it's called Air Console, actually allows you to have a real-time multiplayer experience with just the devices that you have. And that's a browser on your desktop screen, and using your smartphones as controllers. And both controllers and main screen are developed in HTML5 and give you an opportunity to create real-time multiplayer games. So if you're into multiplayer, this is definitely a platform you should check out. Then we can even publish on TV platforms. So I mentioned that Impact has an accompanying tool called Ejecta, which makes it very easy to publish on iOS platforms, including Apple TV. And we can use the same technique that we will use to publish on mobile devices, to publish on Android TV, Amazon Fire TV as well, although Amazon Fire TV accepts native HTML5 builds as well. And something that is very interesting to me, there are even set-up boxes, and their providers have their own stores where they serve HTML5 games, and those include Virgin Media's TiVo in the UK, as well as Comcast Xfinity X1 in the US. And I mean, they're kind of not so straightforward to penetrate those markets, but still another option if you decide to make HTML5 games. And lastly, I think the most exciting new thing in the whole HTML5 ecosystem is Messenger app games. And you've probably all heard about Facebook Instant Games, but Telegram, Kik, which is, I think, popular with teenagers, I'm not sure, Line, which is very popular in Japan, and WeChat and QQ, which are extremely popular in China, which may explain so many tools developed in China for HTML5 development. They all allow you to really reach huge amounts of players, but they focus on different kind of experiences. So they focus on more socially based experiences, cooperation based experiences, and more instant experiences. And the greatest thing is that these platforms cannot be targeted with any other technology. So they're specifically HTML5 only. So it's really a great opportunity to reach a lot of players if you develop in HTML5. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is the newest addition to APIs for JavaScript, which is called WebVR. And it's an opportunity to provide VR experiences inside of a browser. And it's not still yet fully supported by major browser developers. It's fully supported by Firefox, and there are even tools such as A-Frame and even Babylon.js and Play Canvas. They also have options to create VR builds. So I think this might be the next big thing in the HTML5 environment. And I personally am very excited for this. And I would like to conclude with this and say that I've showed you that you have really a vast choice of tools to choose, from having complete control to taking something out of the box, from having completely free and open source environments to having some paid services and everything. And if you choose HTML5 to develop games, you can not only target most popular platforms, but you can also target platforms that are HTML5 specific. And I think for small studios with limited budget, having one code base that can target multiple platforms and even some that are exclusive can really be a good choice for developing their games. So basically that's it. Thanks a lot for coming and listening. These are my email and very unpractical Twitter handles, so feel free to contact me anytime.
Hello, there we go. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask you, where do you see the future of HTML5 in terms of games, platforms, and tools?
Well, the last two things that I've talked about, so definitely messenger apps are the newest thing, and they're still evolving. So, and there's a lot of testing going on just to see how social element of messenger apps can be integrated with gamification and just games to have the most I guess, the most revenue and also the most traction with players. And as I said, WebVR, I think, is the next thing. It definitely can compare with Oculus and other, you know, developing platforms. But if you imagine you can send just a link to somebody, they could have a VR experience. I think that can be a very powerful tool, at least for marketing, but maybe even for full-blown games.
Many people have brought up their concerns with the HTML5 game performance inside Cordova and PhoneGap. What are your experiences? Have you used them in that way?
Yeah, well, it really depends on what you're making, you know. Like, if you're trying to make open world 3D game, I wouldn't recommend this technology. So basically, you definitely have to test it out. I'm not saying this is a silver bullet. I'm not saying this is going to be great for anything. You just, I mean, everything. You just have to know what limitations of your game are, what you want to accomplish, and just test it out. I mean, really based on the project, it can work great, or if you want to do something more than it's really able to do, then you can have issues. I mean, definitely there has to be some tweaks between different platforms and technologies, but I guess that's with any tool available.
So, just starting out, like doing a first HTML5 game, do we really need to kind of dig deep into what tools, what frameworks, what is optimal for our type of game? Because it's kind of daunting when you want to just make a first game on the platform doing all this research, choosing from all these choices. Is there like something that is kind of standard for first-timers?
I'm not sure, you know, like there isn't something like Unity in HTML5, and I think that was one of the reasons why it didn't get so popular, because there was no main players, you know, pushing the technology. I don't know, I would recommend Phaser because I'm using it and I think it's very friendly, but it then again depends if you want to go too much into coding or you want to have more visual environment. So really, my goal with this presentation is just to show the vast, all the options that you have as a developer. And I think that I hope this was helpful for somebody not to just browse around, but to see which tools might be best for them. So I don't know, maybe if, I would recommend Phaser, but then you can have Impact or Coco. Even Coco is very powerful. So it really depends on the developer and on their skills. so to say.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
We have a couple of games in Unity, hyper-casual games, and as of right now, we are evaluating to push it to the HTML5. And how do you suggest, like, what should be careful about?
So you want to come from Unity to HTML5?
Yeah, we already have games in Unity. We are trying to port them to HTML5.
Well, yeah, I showed there's that tool, Convert to Canvas, I think it's called. It's an option to create more optimized builds. As I said, it's very pricey, so I don't know what's your price range and how much you want to invest in it. But basically, I don't know, maybe you can use, are your games 2D, 3D games?
2D games.
So yeah, you should go through the engines, maybe see which engines have the most features that you require, and have best documentation for your developers to have the best learning curve to just start quickly developing. I mean, there are a lot of tools. As I said, I personally use Phaser. I would recommend it, but it all depends on your structure, your team, and what you want to accomplish.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation first.
Thanks.
I would like to ask you something about that. I'm a teacher in a vocational high school, and we teach HTML5 and PHP too. And I would like to ask you that how can I start my students to find out a way in coding HTML and HTML5 for games?
Can I ask which school, what kind of program is it?
Yeah, school is vocational high school. It's kind of they only see the computer-based things, for example, like web programming, and also PHP lessons, as I said, and programming basics. We have those lessons, and we have lots of times for example, for HTML5 or HTML, because it's in our national ministry's program too. So what can I do for my students? I would like you to suggest me something.
Yeah, well, since you're coding, your classes are based on coding, my first thought was to recommend GDevelop, since it doesn't require coding, but because you're focused on coding. For instance, I think that Phaser, and again, I'm biased about this, Phaser has really a lot of examples that your students can use for developing their own games. So there's really a lot of stuff that showcase the features of the engine. So, and it's really widely open, and it's also free and open source, so you won't have any licensing issues. So you should definitely check Phaser website and all the examples for the latest engine, and see if that is friendly enough for your students to figure out the concepts. And just, there are a lot of coding snippets that they can just copy and change towards their needs.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you everybody for listening, and I'll be around if you want to chat about this or anything else. Thanks a lot.